Today, I want to talk about something we all wrestle with, setting goals and actually achieving them. You've probably heard the statistic 97% of goals fail. That's a staggering number. Almost everyone sets goals. Almost everyone has dreams, ambitions, plans, yet most fall short. Why? When we talk about why goals fail, one of the first things we need to understand is that most people set goals thinking the goal itself will be enough to pull them through. They imagine that having a big, powerful intention will somehow be enough to get them out of bed earlier, to make better choices under stress, or to stay consistent when motivation runs dry. And that's where the trouble begins, because it almost never works that way. The reality is, the people who consistently succeed, the 3%, don't just set goals. They build systems that make achieving those goals inevitable. They recognize that motivation is a fleeting feeling. It's like the weather. Some days it shows up bright and strong. Other days it's cloudy, cold, and nowhere to be found. If you're relying on motivation to guide your actions, you're setting yourself up for inconsistency. And inconsistency is the death of almost any goal. Instead, the 3%, they reverse engineer the outcome they want and build processes around it. For them, the question isn't how can I stay motivated to reach my goal? It's how can I design my day, my environment, and my habits so that progress happens even when I'm not feeling motivated at all. Let's make that practical. Imagine someone sets a goal to write a book. Now, most people would say, all right, I need to write a book. Let me wait for inspiration to hit, and when it does, I'll sit down and hammer out some pages. Maybe that works once or twice, but then life gets in the way. Energy dips. Other obligations take over. Weeks pass, and the manuscript gathers dust. The 3%, by contrast, don't trust inspiration to strike. They schedule writing sessions at specific times, in specific places, under specific conditions. They might commit to writing for 30 minutes every morning at 7 a.m., regardless of whether they feel like it. They might remove distractions by turning off their phone, setting a timer, and creating a physical space that's dedicated to that work. The goal is not to write a masterpiece in one sitting. It's to show up consistently, to create a repeatable system that makes progress unavoidable. The same principle applies to fitness, learning a new skill, building a business, anything meaningful you're trying to achieve. The 3% don't just say I want to get fit and then hope to find time after work when they're tired and hungry. They put their workouts on their calendar like non-negotiable appointments. They pack their gym clothes the night before. They might even choose a gym that's conveniently located between their work and home to reduce friction. They are engineering a system where the easiest choice is the one that aligns with their goal. Now, a key part of building effective systems is recognizing that friction matters. The more friction there is between you and the behavior you want, the less likely you are to follow through. Conversely, the less friction, the more automatic the behavior becomes. If you want to meditate every morning, don't keep your meditation cushion buried in a closet somewhere. Put it out where you'll see it. Set reminders. Make starting easy. This isn't about willpower. Willpower is a limited resource. It's like a muscle. It fatigues throughout the day. You can absolutely use it, but the more you rely on it, the riskier your strategy becomes. What the 3% understand is that systems are a way to offload the need for constant willpower. They put structure and momentum in place so that success becomes the default. Another critical element is recognizing that identity plays a massive role here. The 3% aren't just chasing goals. They're building identities through their systems. They're not just trying to run a marathon. They're becoming runners. They're not just trying to launch a startup. They're becoming entrepreneurs. Every time they engage with their system, showing up at the gym, sitting down to write, taking that small step forward, they reinforce an identity that naturally produces the outcomes they want. Think about that for a sec. If you identify as someone who tries to be healthy, it's an ongoing negotiation. Some days you win, some days you don't. But if you start to see yourself as someone who is healthy, someone for whom daily exercise and clean eating are normal, everything shifts. Your system isn't just helping you act differently, it's helping you become someone different. That's powerful. Now, systems don't need to be complicated to be effective. In fact, the best systems are usually incredibly simple. A 10-minute journaling habit every evening can change how you process your day. A 5-minute breathwork routine can fundamentally shift how you handle stress. A simple no meetings before 10 a.m. rule can create space for your most important creative work. These small systems, applied consistently, create leverage, and over time that leverage compounds. Of course, even the best system won't work if it's not flexible. Life happens. Kids get sick. Work emergencies come up. Travel disrupts routine. The 3% expect these disruptions, and they design their systems with flexibility in mind. They don't beat themselves up for missing a day. They focus on getting back on track quickly. They think in terms of trends, not isolated events. One missed workout doesn't break break the cyst. Staying off track for weeks does. So they zoom out, they look at the bigger pattern, they course correct early. Another interesting feature of the 3% is that they often stack their systems for maximum impact. They might pair habits together, for example, doing mobility exercises while listening to a favorite podcast, making the system enjoyable, efficient, and something they actually look forward to. They leverage the brain's natural tendency to link behaviors together, creating what's called a habit chain. One action triggers the next, creating a smooth, self-reinforcing loop. Ultimately, the reason the 3% succeed isn't that they're superhuman. It's that they respect human nature enough to build structures around it. They understand that feelings are unreliable, that environments influence behavior, that friction can be a deal breaker, that momentum compounds, and most importantly, they don't leave their goals to chance. They don't rely on fleeting moments of inspiration or hope that future me will magically have more discipline. They build systems today that carry them through tomorrow's challenge. If you're serious about achieving your goals, if you want to move from the 97% to the 3%, it's not about trying harder. It's about designing smarter. It's about asking, how can I make the right behaviors easy, automatic, and almost inevitable? When you approach your goals this way, when you think like a systems builder instead of a motivation chaser, you start to realize something. Success isn't about giant bursts of effort. It's about setting up the conditions where tiny, consistent actions stack up into massive outcomes over time. And that's the real difference. One of the most fundamental differences between the 97% who struggle to reach their goals and the 3% who consistently succeed lies in how they respond to failure. It's easy to believe that successful people don't experience setbacks, that somehow their journey is smoother, easier, or free from mistakes, but that couldn't be further from the truth. The reality is they fail just as often, sometimes more. The difference is in how they interpret and respond to failure when it happens. When most people encounter failure, they tend to internalize it. They experience a setback, and their mind immediately jumps to conclusions. I'm not cut out for this. I'm just not disciplined enough. Maybe I'm aiming too high. That emotional reaction can be so strong that it completely derails their progress. It convinces them that the goal itself was unrealistic, or that they aren't capable of achieving it. And so slowly, quietly, they let the goal slip away. The 3%, on the other hand, approach failure very differently. They don't see it as a personal verdict. They see it as feedback. Every missed workout, every botched presentation, every failed attempt is valuable information. It's data. And if you're willing to listen to that data without ego, without judgment, it can guide you to make smarter decisions moving forward. Think about the last time you set out to do something meaningful and hit a wall. Maybe you started strong for a few days or a few weeks, but eventually the old habits crept back in. Maybe you missed a few days of progress and felt like you had to start over. If you're like most people, you probably felt discouraged, maybe even embarrassed. That emotional weight is often heavier than the failure itself. Now imagine a different response. Imagine seeing that setback and thinking, okay, interesting. What exactly caused me to miss those days? What was happening around me? What was happening inside me? Was it lack of sleep? Was it poor planning? Was it stress at work? Suddenly, instead of feeling like a failure, you're operating like a scientist, running experiments, gathering data, making adjustments. That's what they don't treat failure as a signal to stop. They treat it as a signal to adjust. This mindset shift is absolutely crucial, because no matter how good your systems are, no matter how strong your planning is, life will still throw curveballs at you. Things will go wrong. Progress will stall. You'll make mistakes. Expecting otherwise is not just unrealistic, it's setting yourself up for disappointment. But if you expect setbacks as part of the journey, you can prepare yourself emotionally to handle them with resilience rather than retreat. When you treat failure as feedback, you begin to view the entire process of goal pursuit differently. You're no longer aiming for perfection. You're aiming for adaptation. You're not trying to be flawless. You're trying to be flexible. Take the example of someone training for a marathon. If they miss a long run due to injury, the average person might say, well, I guess the training's ruined. Maybe I'm just not a runner. But someone in the 3% would step back and ask, what led to the injury? Was it poor form, lack of recovery, nutrition issue? What can I tweak in my training plan to keep moving forward without repeating the same mistake? They pivot, they modify their training, they focus on healing and strengthening, and they stay in the game. This approach isn't just more effective, it's emotionally healthier. Instead of riding the highs of success and the lows of failure like a roller coaster, you start to build a steady sense of confidence, not because everything always goes your way, but because you know that no matter what happens, you can adjust and keep moving forward. That kind of resilience is rare, and it's exactly what separates the 3% from everyone else. There's also a deep biological basis for this. Our nervous systems are wired to seek safety, to avoid discomfort and uncertainty. When we experience failure, especially public failure, it triggers a real physical stress response, elevated cortisol, increased heart rate, heightened vigilance. It feels uncomfortable because it is uncomfortable. But the 3% train themselves over time to recognize that this discomfort isn't dangerous. It's simply a signal that learning is happening. Growth always comes with discomfort. Always. The key is to stay engaged even when it feels uncomfortable. When you can stay present with the discomfort of a setback, examine it objectively, and extract useful lessons from it, you're literally rewiring your brain for greater adaptability. You're teaching your system that setbacks are survivable, not only survivable, but valuable. There's an old saying that success is built on a mountain of failures no one sees. That's not just a poetic idea, it's biologically true. Every time you fail, adjust and persist, you strengthen neural pathways associated with problem solving, emotional regulation, and long-term focus. You are sculpting a brain and a body that can handle bigger goals, more complex challenges, and higher levels of pressure. That's the real reward. It's also important to point out that the 3% don't romanticize failure. They don't seek it out for its own sake. They simply accept that it's inevitable when you're playing at your edge, and they prepare for it. They build in reflection routines. They schedule regular check-ins with themselves or with mentors. They measure progress, not just by how fast they're moving, but by how quickly they can recover and adapt when they hit obstacles. One practical way to adopt this mindset is to replace judgmental self-talk with curiosity. When something goes wrong, instead of saying, "I'm terrible at this," you ask, "What exactly happened here? What can I learn from this? What small change would make it easier next time?" That shift from judgment to curiosity is subtle, but it's profound. It keeps you emotionally engaged, mentally sharp, and moving forward. Another technique the 3% use is something called error recovery protocols. That simply means they have a predefined plan for getting back on track after a set. If they miss a workout, there's no drama. They immediately implement a lighter session the next day. If they break a healthy eating streak, they don't spiral into guilt. They simply plan their next healthy meal. By planning for recovery ahead of time, they strip setbacks of their emotional power. It becomes routine. Fall, recover, continue. Ultimately, treating failure as feedback allows you to transform what most people see as a dead end into a stepping stone. Every goal, every dream worth chasing, will inevitably put you in situations where you don't have all the answers, where your first plan doesn't work, where you feel exposed or inadequate. That's not evidence that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence that you're doing something worth. And once you realize that, you start to welcome failure, not because it feels good, but because you understand its role. Failure is not the enemy. It's not something to be avoided at all costs. It's something to be harvested, studied, used. Failure, handled the right way, becomes. If you can do that, if you can train yourself to treat every setback, not as a reason to stop, but as a reason to sharpen your strategy, there's almost nothing you can't accomplish over time. That's the truth about and it's a truth available to anyone willing to shift their mindset, lean into the discomfort, and use failure the way it was always meant to be used, as a tool for growth.